Hi, the purpose of this video is to take you through a little bit of the process to prepare for direct examination. So if you are preparing to question a witness for mock trial, this can be a helpful resource for you to know where to start. You have this affidavit, you have this witness, but where do you start and how do you do this? Those are the questions that this video is going to try to answer for you. So we're going to start off by talking about the first step in what is a 5-step process to prepare for direct examination. And that is to first review the indictment and make sure that you are clear on what you need to accomplish through your questioning. What is it that you need your witness to say to help your side of the case? Okay, so in your mock trial materials, you will have a document that is called the indictment, where it's going to outline specifically what the defendant is being charged with and the statutes or the wording of the law that correspond with those charges. So for today, I'm going to use as an example, I'm going to use the case of the State versus Goldilocks. If you are unfamiliar with the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, it would be well worth your time to Google that and get familiar so you can kind of understand this example. But here I have the indictment for Goldilocks. She is being charged with theft in the 3rd degree, criminal mischief in the 2nd degree, and criminal trespass in the 1st degree. Okay. And as I continue on in this document, I can see here that I've got some of the specifics of what that means. What does it mean that she's charged with criminal mischief, with trespassing? We can see some of those specifics here. So I want to look at this and I want to get familiar with exactly what it is that I'm either going to have to prove or I'm going to have to create reasonable doubt about, right? Okay, so she did unlawfully and knowingly commit the theft of porridge, okay? She did unlawfully and intentionally damage a chair, and she had no right to do so or reasonable ground to believe that she had a right. And then last but not least, she did unlawfully and knowingly enter and remain in their dwelling. So if I'm on the prosecution side, I'm going to have to prove these things true beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I'm on the defense, then I want to create reasonable doubt about whether or not she really did these things. That's really important for me to get clear on before I start writing my questions, because the witness might have things in their affidavit that are not super relevant to what I want to show. And I can kind of ignore those things. But if I'm clear on what I want to show, I can kind of focus in on those things and highlight those in their testimony. Okay? Okay, so proving that these counts align with what they did or creating doubt about whether the defendant really did those things or had criminal intent is what we're trying to do. Okay, so once I'm clear on the indictment and the charges, I'm going to go to my second step, which is to read through the affidavit, identify the strengths and weaknesses of what the witness has said, and make note of what I would like to emphasize through my questioning for the jury to hear. Okay. So here I have an affidavit for a witness for the defense, and this is the woodcutter. So what I've done is up here at the top, I've created a text marking key to kind of help me make sense of what I'm reading in his statement. I'm going to be looking for the strengths of his statement, such as things that make him seem believable, establish important facts, or things that I think will play well with the jury, might give him emotional appeal to the jury. Those are the strengths. And then I'm also going to highlight his weaknesses. Like, what about what he's said here makes him look not so believable, or like he's unsure of the facts, or maybe he's biased, or he remembers something incorrectly, possibly. Those are the things that I want to look for as the weaknesses, okay? So as I read through this, the first thing that kind of stands out to me is he says that he was out cutting wood when I saw the little girl Goldilocks picking up pine cones in the woods. And that makes me wonder if the woodcutter has a prior relationship with the defendant. Now, I think that would be a weakness, right? Because he may have some interest in seeing this trial work out in her favor. He might be here for more than just reporting the straight facts of the case if he knows her and has a relationship with her. So I'm gonna highlight that as a weakness here. As I keep reading, I do see some strengths here. He sees her, he sees that she wasn't dressed warmly, and he told her that she should go home because there was a big storm coming. So to me, this shows that the woodcutter is a caring person. He's a compassionate person who's looking out for other people. Those are things that I want the jury to see about my witness. Okay? And then last of all, he describes this storm, and he says, soon the storm hit. It was so bad I had to go get in my pickup to wait it out. It was a terrible storm. Okay, so this is a strength of the woodcutter's affidavit because it's showing us that Goldilocks might have had no choice but to enter the Three Bears house to preserve her own life, right? If the storm was so severe that even the woodcutter, who's kind of a hardened, outdoorsy man, has to take shelter himself, it makes sense that Goldilocks would also have to take shelter for her own safety. So I'm starting to see that through his statement, my defense is kind of taking shape. Remember that if we go back to the indictment, one of the charges here says that the defendant did unlawfully enter the Three Bears house. But if I can show that the storm was so severe that she might have lost her life if she didn't enter the house, then that was an act of necessity and not an unlawful act. So this is how I'm going to try to use the woodcutter's statement to support the narrative of the case that I want to put out there, okay? Okay, so I've identified the strengths, I've identified the weaknesses. The next step that I'm going to take is to write my questions. Now, with direct, your questions need to be open-ended. What that means is they cannot be yes or no questions or questions that lead the witness, okay? They have to be like explain, describe, or who, what, where, when, why kind of questions, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start writing some questions, and there are some good guidelines here. Make sure that as you're asking the questions that you do use transitions to lead your witness through their account, because you have to remember that your witness knows their story and you know their story, but the jury does not know their story. So make sure that you're using transitions so that the jury can really follow what it is the witness is trying to say. Okay, that'll help a lot. Okay, so here's some questions that I wrote. Hello, woodcutter. Could you please introduce yourself to the court? This is a great place to start. Have the witness introduce themselves. Can you explain in your experience what happened on February 15th, 2021? Can you describe what you saw Goldilocks wearing that day? Okay, and this is going to be significant, right? Because we want to prove that Goldilocks was underdressed to weather and survive the storm. So when he describes her as being not dressed for inclement weather, that's going to help our case. How severe would you say the storm became? And this is where he's going to get to go off at length about how severe it was, that it was dangerous. That's going to help our case. That's going to help us prove that it was an act of necessity, not an act of trespassing. Okay. Okay. The last two steps are to coach the witness by drilling those questions and helping them give responses that help your case. Don't assume that your witness is going to say the right things in response to your questions. Part of mock trial is to work with that witness and help them understand how they can respond in a way that's favorable to the case. Remember, too, that they have to tell the truth, so they can't depart from their affidavit, and as their counsel, it's your job to help them make sure that they don't do that. And then finally, step 5 would be to consider the weaknesses of your witnesses' statements and help them to prepare to respond to those issues in cross-examination. So direct is going to be a relatively friendly process, right? You're going to call your witness to the stand. You're going to ask them some questions. It's not combative. It's cooperative, okay? But after you ask your questions, cross-examination is going to occur, and that's where the opposing side is going to get a chance to ask your witness some questions too. And that is going to be less friendly, okay? So that can be a really hard thing for a witness to go through. As the counsel for the witness, you can help them to possibly prepare to respond in a way that doesn't damage their testimony or their credibility with the jury. Okay, so let's take a look at our witness statement again. And we did identify one weakness in this very short witness statement, which was that we were concerned that maybe the woodcutter had a prior relationship with the defendant here. And it might show bias or some kind of conflict of interest. So let's say that this comes up in cross-examination. Let's say they say, woodcutter, you acknowledge that you had a prior relationship with Goldilocks. Is that correct? Now, your witness can just say yes, okay, but if they just say yes, that's going to lead to all sorts of questions in the mind of the jury about what that relationship was and what it means for the case. A better answer would be something like, yes, in the sense that I knew who she was, yes, but it's a very small village and everyone knows everyone. That's going to make sense to a jury, and it's not untruthful, right? So as a direct examiner, you can kind of work with your witness to help them prepare for cross-examination, and be successful with that stage of the trial. Okay, so these are 5 steps that you can use to prepare questions for direct examination of a lay witness in a mock trial. Good luck with your questions, stay truthful, and you'll do great.